Hi GameSpot viewers, I'm Kevin Van Ord and I'm joined by the marvelous Carolyn Pettit.
Hello.
And we're here because we want to talk about BioShock Infinite's ending. So obviously, let this be a warning to you. We are about to spoil the end of BioShock Infinite for you.
Spoil the crap out of it.
Yeah.
We are going to go through it with like a fine-tooth comb, talk about it, we're going to watch it, leave no stone unturned.
Yeah, so be sure if you haven't played BioShock Infinite and you plan to, don't watch this until you have. However, we do think that there's a lot to talk about with BioShock Infinite's ending, and this is our chance to do that. And we also want you to participate. So there's a lot of things that are still sometimes a little unclear in our minds, or that they're up for interpretation. So tell us where we're wrong.
Right.
Tell us what you think that's different, or tell us anything about what you think about BioShock Infinite's ending. This is where you can do it without fear that you're going to be spoiling it for other people.
Absolutely.
So without further ado, I think we should just get right into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So here is the very end of the final battle.
Yes.
And what we see is the
statue where Elizabeth has been imprisoned her
entire life, basically, yeah,
Yes.
is now on fire. We see that we see the state of Columbia all around us. You see these clouds. Now we have to destroy the siphon.
This moment, like, there was a part of me when this was happening where I was sort of hoping there was a little bit of like Ocarina of Time style, push the buttons to play the notes gameplay.
Right.
But
especially because the game begins that way with a little bit of like the bell tapping thing at the lighthouse.
So the statue obviously really important because it holds the siphon, which has functioned as a kind of draining leash on Elizabeth's natural powers.
Right. Elizabeth has not had the ability to create tears out of thin air.
And the instant that siphon is destroyed,
Check her out.
she sure takes advantage of that power.
Look how powerful she looks, too.
It reminds me, to a certain degree, of like Galadriel in the Fellowship of the Ring, where she kind of tests the power of the ring and she becomes this really fearsome figure for a moment. Okay.
There's a lot to talk about right here in this moment, too.
And this instant, I knew where we are, and I got just shivers down my spine.
And
because this is like, you realize it's all connected. You know, it's more than just thematic tissue connecting the BioShock games.
It's actual, kind of the space they inhabit is sort of the same, and not at the same time.
Right, exactly.
The most interesting, well, not the most interesting, but an interesting part of this too is Songbird. We see towards the beginning that it's foreshadowed that Songbird cannot exist underwater. He starts to crack when you first meet him and you plunge into the depths. And so this is how Elizabeth uses her relationship to comfort Songbird in his death.
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Simultaneously as she destroys him. I mean, she is the one destroying him.
Yes, absolutely. But of course, the big thing here is we're in Rapture.
Yes, I mean, just like I said, shivers down my spine to be back here, and it's obviously recreated so faithfully. And for me, it was in particular the music that brought just all of my memories. This music right here, all my memories of playing the original BioShock, just flooding back. You know, it's just such a kind of mental trigger.
And we have a line coming up here too that's a little bit of a, I like the little touches of humor that appear in BioShock Infinite, and Booker has a line saying, "A city underwater, how ridiculous is that?" And you know,
as if the city in the sky is
somehow less
absurd.
Incredible somehow.
Right.
I think he's about to say the line here too. I know, I have the same moment.
Almost makes me want to play BioShock all over again, too.
I know, it does. But what I love here is that BioShock Infinite uses Unreal 3, a more modern version of the engine that BioShocks 1 and 2 used. And so this has been, I think, faithfully updated to look like this is clearly Rapture, but it has been detailed up, if you'll forgive me turning that into a verb. And now...
Okay. So... for the longest time playing this game, I was wondering, why is it called Infinite? Why is it called Infinite? Is that just like a word that, Ken Levine thought would sound cool? Right. But here is where it starts to fall into place, like why this game is called BioShock Infinite.
Right. And we have an infinite number of lighthouses. You look in the sky and you say stars.
Yes.
But what you're seeing is just essentially infinite worlds.
Yes.
And as Elizabeth says, it's always a
man, always a city,
always a city,
always a lighthouse.
Always a lighthouse.
And so from there, so you realize, okay, Rapture is one permutation of that. Columbia is obviously another. And our imaginations can go wild imagining all the infinite variations of that there can possibly be. And I really hope that the infinite is like where that stops and where Levine just leaves the rest up to our imaginations, because I think that's more powerful than having any more of those possibilities like concretely defined for us.
And it's interesting coming through this doorway,
Yes.
and Elizabeth, who was just behind you, seemingly,
Yes.
is now on the other side of the door when you open it.
Yes.
And you really begin to see the extent of what Elizabeth can do and what Tears can do.
Yes.
Because we're not just talking about infinite examples of men, cities, and lighthouses, but we're seeing infinite examples of small differences between the same places.
Exactly.
And now Elizabeth gets to essentially take you to all the different possibilities, all the different ways that Columbia is and exists. And as we've talked about before, you and me together, with the Luteces, they say earlier in the game, like, dies, will die.
Yes.
And you soon discover here that really it's everywhere at once, exists at one time.
I mean, you see Elizabeth reading a book about quantum physics, I think, there's these ideas about just kind of infinite universes that are just have variations, one from another, and they kind of maybe ripple out in all kinds of ways.
And it's perfect here too, because as you discover truly the non-limits, and this is an incredible moment too, where you see more variations on your current circumstance happening all around you.
More Bookers and Elizabeth.
More Bookers and Elizabeth doing that which you are doing right now, only in their own permutations of those same worlds.
Right.
Very creepy. And you begin to realize too now how Comstock really has become known as a prophet, because he now has had this technology to do this. This is how he's a prophet. He knows,
of course,
all of these permutations as well. And now that Elizabeth can, you begin to realize why she was the perfect replacement for Comstock, because she too has been. So this technology has been inserted into her being as well.
Obviously, we're at the ending of the game here, but I love the way Infinite starts planting those seeds from so early on that there is that kind of technology or something at play. The first wonderful clue of that for me was when you see the Barbershop Quartet performing God Only Knows, which is a Beach Boys song.
Right. How is this to be? How is this happening?
And then, of course, as you progress through the game, and you see, okay, well, like Jeremiah Fink's brother steals music from the future, and it's...
My favorite example of that is the Everybody Wants to Rule the World from Tears for Fears might be my... Now here we're really getting into some nitty-gritty. So you see here, and this is an image that's been repeated at different times through the game.
Baptism, of course, you have to be baptized when you arrive.
Get into Columbia. Yes. And you see here a memory of sorts, and you discover that Booker, after his troubles at Wounded Knee and all of his history, that he now has an opportunity to be baptized.
To, wipe the slate clean, as it were, to completely, morally just kind of start anew.
And we hear this music that's been used, this hymn, The Circle Will Be Broken, and so on and so forth. And just watching this now, and I've already played this multiple times, but I'm getting chills yet again, because that's the power of music in this game.
Yes.
And we'll soon discover that this music can take an ominous turn as well. So this is a reality, a memory, as it were. A memory,
yes.
Of the reality that we've come to know through Booker's current circumstance. That relates to his refusal to be baptism, to be baptized,
yes.
Is the choice that he's made, or at least the choice he thinks that he has made,
that
he remembers making. But as we soon are to discover in a multiverse such as this, that may not have been the only possibility.
Your mind, as the game indicates, your mind kind of can shift to accommodate whatever reality you're confronted with.
And now we are back to Booker's seeming hiring to find the girl, and you've gone through
by a very familiar figure at this point.
Luteces here. Or the male version of Luteces. We'll get more into that.
Samuel?
I forget their first names because I continually thought of them as Luteces.
Right.
So here is where a bomb is about to be dropped, and you know that there's a character somewhere in Booker's past called Anna.
Anna, yes.
And now you get to discover who Anna really was, and why Booker also has the brand AD on the back of his hand.
Anna DeWitt.
Yes.
There was no baby, and if there was, I sure as hell wouldn't give it over to this guy.
Booker.
Yes.
Like Booker, the Booker that we know doesn't remember this per se.
Right.
But because he's crossed universes, memories from other hymns have slowly begun to seep.
Yes. I mean, we see that effect kind of throughout the game of when discordant memories kind of intrude and collide, you know, their noses start bleeding, they kind of lose the ability to function.
Yes. We discover that early on with a contact that dies.
Right.
And then when you cross universes, the contact is still alive.
Exactly. So Booker is, in order to just even be able to function, he is repressing, so much truth, I think.
And this is also the part where this line that you've grown to know through the game, which is like, bring us the girl and wipe away the debt.
Yes.
What Booker thinks he is remembering, which is Luteces saying, go get Elizabeth as we now know Elizabeth, this is actually also the commands given to bring Comstock, the girl, his baby, Anna.
Yes. Now, the Luteces, I think, are just fascinating figures. Throughout the early stages of the game, we mostly see the woman, the female scientist of Columbia, but it's revealed at a certain point that her brother joins her on Columbia, her twin brother, but really, because of the kinds of technology and the kinds of science that they work with, it was a portal that opened, and it's not her twin brother from the same universe. He is her in another universe.
Right.
They are two sides of the same coin, the male and female halves of the same person, which is why they are able to finish each other's sentences throughout the game.
And why it also makes sense. I mean, one of the first things you do in the game when making a choice is, it's not really a choice, but there's the whole coin flipping thing early on. And they also provide a lot of humor.
Oh, they're
through the game.
Absolutely. They're delightful.
And now you're revisiting the very beginning of the game, bring us the girl and wipe away your debt, except you're walking into another moment. And you now see, here is Comstock holding Anna, and he is now going to escape through the tear.
Yes.
Holding Elizabeth, and one of BioShock Infinite's many mysteries is about to come clear, which is why does Elizabeth wear a thimble?
Yes.
And now you see how Elizabeth has lost the tip of her finger here. Because now it becomes clear that Anna is Elizabeth.
Anna is, right.
And that Elizabeth is Booker's daughter.
Yes.
So obviously one bombshell, and this bombshell did not necessarily come as a surprise to me. It is what follows from here that comes as a much bigger surprise. And this is the clearest we have ever seen this particular area in my mind.
Yes.
And now we see the AD, and the Luteces call it his hair shirt.
His hair shirt, yes.
So in other words, this is his self-punishment has been to engrave this on his hand so that he doesn't forget, even though he has essentially forgotten.
So we
And now
come
another
back
tear.
again to where it all started.
And now we see
This is where we see how DeWitt had to his memories, his perceptions had to kind of change in order to accommodate the reality that he was confronted with.
He has no choice but for these memories to seep
Yes.
into place or to fill in the cracks,
Yes.
as it were. And we see the Luteces here. And now a lot of things that happened at the very beginning of the game start to become more clear as well, because the game begins essentially with the Luteces rowing you across
Exactly.
the lake into the lighthouse.
You're quite fond of this theory of yours.
He's manufacturing new memories from his old ones.
Yep, there you go.
Yes.
And they not only mention the hair shirt part, but they also call Booker their hair shirt.
Yes. Yes. It's conflict between the two of them that has led to so much of what has happened. There's
You did try to weasel out.
like a voxophone where the female Lutece, recounts how her brother wants to kind of undo what they've done, and where he sees a blank page, she sees King Lear.
Right.
So they're two sides of the same coin, but not always in agreement with each other.
Exactly.
And it's actually out of that disagreement that that gives rise to so much of what happens in this game.
And again, it's very interesting that line, "Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt," can be used in both circumstances here.
Right.
Not only for the original hiring, but also for their return. And in a sense, it's very smart of them, because they're not actually putting Booker in a position of misunderstanding, or the player for that matter. It's very important that statement be able to be used for both circumstances.
Yes. It's yes, very, very important.
And there you see it once again.
Yes.
But now,
Are you sure?
are we sure? Because Booker thinks that we are in the process of defeating Comstock by killing him in his crib.
Therefore, making it so that none of this ever happens.
Right. So then, Booker is essentially saying, "What are we doing in this place?
Why are we here? This
Yes.
is not what I expected."
Right. And then
Yes.
something very important happens, and you begin to see
You chose to walk away.
multiple Elizabeths, and you've seen these Elizabeths in your game.
As a different
You see these Elizabeths walking in from different places, because this must be.
Smother him in the crib.
smother.
You are to be smothered in your crib.
Right.
and-
This is the moment of Comstock's birth.
right.
He was yes.
Because as we know now,
DeWitt is Comstock.
DeWitt is-
Comstock is DeWitt.
exactly, and Comstock is born at the moment that DeWitt is baptized.
Yes.
So
And so if he is to be killed at the moment of his birth, this is
then you
what must
drown
happen.
Booker
Yes.
before he can be baptized, and this is exactly what's happening. Is Booker is being drowned by Elizabeths from
From
many universes.
from realities, yes.
and you see them disappear because of
Because-
course, what's another takeaway from Comstock and Booker being killed is that Elizabeth no longer then exists. That is how I take the disappearing here, at least. Do you disagree?
Anna would have been born before the baptism, though, right?
Oh yeah, you're
Anna,
right.
Anna DeWitt.
You're right, Anna DeWitt.
So the child exists, but obviously her life would not be anything like what it is, because she would not be taken to Columbia. She would not be, because
Comstock would not exist, so
exist.
therefore he would not have stolen her.
Right.
But does that? There's so
She would
many
not
here.
be-
This is almost impossible to
It's-
sort of.
to like mentally try to like unravel at this point. What
Yeah.
what exactly does eliminating Comstock
mean
kind of how
for
mean
Elizabeth,
for reality,
you're
mean
right.
for Elizabeth.
I always sort of took it. Well, obviously I was wrong, but there was part of me thinking, well, does Elizabeth then cease to exist for some reason, or
I think Anna DeWitt now exists.
Right.
Because and Elizabeth
An
never
alternate
will
reality
exist.
where she
she just-
was never taken. There
Yes.
was no Comstock.
Exactly.
But and then it becomes, and then I kind of wonder too, does this mean that all Bookers are gone?
or
Or
just
are there
in this,
Bookers that simply
Yeah.
never got to that point? Are there Bookers that never fought in Wounded Knee?
Right.
What does this mean for a multiverse? Or does this only affect multiverses in which the circumstances that we more or less witness occurred? And there's something that comes after the credits
Yes.
as we watch them roll, and of course we're here to, well,
Yeah.
first of all, thank you to the team
Yes.
at Irrational.
Right.
But
Right, but I mean, the game raises a question of, I think, how much when you go through a tear, when Elizabeth creates a tear and you go through it, to what extent are you entering an alternate reality that existed already, and to what extent is Elizabeth
Creating one.
that? Because there's the, and this is kind of, I think, maybe most clearly manifested with the, there's God
There it
only
is,
knows,
yes.
but the fights with the ghost, as it were, of
Lady Comstock.
Lady Comstock.
Yeah.
I think Elizabeth says as much as that she is like a combination of whatever she actually is and what Elizabeth envisioned her to be. Like all of the emotions, all of the rage, everything
Right.
that Elizabeth growing up kind of, implanted on her in her mind.
This is getting very metaphysical, of course.
It is.
And then it raises the question too, though, like, is there really a difference between a universe that already exists and one that Elizabeth creates? Because essentially, if there are an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities, surely that means that Elizabeth creating one and Elizabeth going to one are essentially the same
exactly,
thing.
right, because what is infinity plus one? It's still
infinity, right. And
yes.
so this is where the mind starts to boggle, of course. But the big takeaway, so here's what we learn through this ending in terms of just plot alone,
Sure.
is that we learn that, number one, that Elizabeth is Booker's daughter.
Yes.
We learn that Booker and Comstock are the same person.
Yes.
Essentially, they are, or as you may say about the Luteces, two sides of the same person.
Yes, but in a different sense.
Right.
Because in a linear path, DeWitt literally goes on to become Comstock, whereas the male Lutece and the female Lutece are the same person perhaps from different
places.
realities. I wish that we had a somewhat better sense maybe of how after that moment of baptism, DeWitt became Comstock.
What was the process from...
Right, because he has these
that
sins that he
moment.
wants to wash away, that he's obviously very troubled by Wounded Knee and everything, and yet so you'd think that perhaps after his baptism he would want to move away from
the racism and
Exactly.
the
yet-
troubled things that we saw.
and yet clearly he
Plaguing him.
ends up embracing those things, and perhaps it's just a matter of power corrupting, which is a theme that has run throughout.
That would be a
not just-
BioShock thing.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's whether it's the Comstock or Fink or Fitzroy, leader of the Vox Populi.
Well, we see them all just
Right, I mean,
destroy a
yeah.
society in their own way.
I mean, when you first meet Fitzroy, she's this seemingly kind of noble freedom fighter, fighting for the oppressed people. But then you go to these worlds where the Vox Populi is just drunk with power, and where she is a monster. They say that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and maybe that's what happened to Comstock.
Here we see too, I love the reminder of the Scott Joplin tunes. One of my favorite things in the game is there's a tune that plays during loading screens, and it's one of those Scott Joplin tunes. It's da-na, da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. And everything takes on a much more, in some cases, a darker turn. The music feels a lot darker, even when
Yes.
it itself hasn't really changed, because your associations with the music have changed, much in the same way as in BioShock, the original BioShock, and games like that, where where you're now associating different kinds of emotions with this music that wouldn't necessarily take on that emotion on its own.
Right.
So, gosh, I feel like we've said so much, and yet there's still so much more to be said, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is a game that people, I think, will be obviously discussing, puzzling out, coming up with theories around for a long time to come.
Yeah, and that's one of the sign of a great game to me too, is that you have the chance to talk about these things, and we can continue to roll these around in our heads and talk about them with each other. And this is a game that will live on from a narrative perspective, because we're going to be putting together these ideas, and we get to play again. And I think of it a little bit like The Sixth Sense, not because there's one single bomb that gets dropped that changes the way you look at the entire experience,
right?
But there are so many things that you learn
so
in the
many
final
revelations
20 minutes
throughout, absolutely,
that going back and playing it again is a complete joy. Not just because I see things plot-wise from a new perspective, knowing things I can never unknow.
Right.
But there are also the little touches that now, at the beginning of the game, set up the setting, but now have a much deeper meaning because I can connect them to things that I now know that I didn't know when I first started.
Right, exactly.
So it's just that kind of extraordinary sort of tying of everything together that makes this narrative really special. And of course, there are still things that don't make sense narratively speaking that we've talked about a little bit. Like there's that moment where Elizabeth learns what she's supposed to think at that point, which is that Comstock is her father. He is, but at that point, he's not really.
Right.
If this is very hard to describe if you haven't played, but if you've played, you understand.
Yes.
That there's that moment where where Elizabeth discovers that Comstock is her father, much earlier in the game, but there's really not a whole lot of dramatization of that moment, and she opens a lock 2 seconds later like nothing's happened, and there's nothing that's really said in that moment.
Right.
So there are things that don't always come together the way you want them to story-wise, but those are small things in a game that clearly just
it's
astounds from a narrative perspective.
Right. I mean, it does. It goes for big themes. It doesn't shy away from grappling with things like racism and religion and all these massive topics.
And there is the subject, of course, of what is BioShock Infinite saying about Christianity and about baptism at that very end, because being born again, in this case, for Booker, and I don't know that the game is necessarily saying something in general about baptism, about Christianity, and about being born again, but certainly in this case, being born again led to destruction and terror.
Right. For Booker DeWitt, in any case, the baptism, the being born again, did not really wipe his moral slate clean in any sense. It opened up possibilities only for, I think, deeper corruption.
It altered the course, but ultimately,
yes,
it has not made him a better man.
Certainly not.
So I guess we'll let people in the comments decide whether or not they think that BioShock Infinite has terrible things to say about religion and Christianity,
right?
Or
I mean, is it
whether they're appropriate or blasphemous and so on and so
sure,
forth.
Sure. I mean, it could well. I think you could certainly argue that it's not the Christianity that's the problem. It's something in DeWitt himself. It's what he's bringing to that experience. I mean, it's very, very much open to interpretation, and I think, as you say, I mean, that's one of the marks of a great game and a great narrative, is that there's so much there for us to delve into, to dig around in, to think about.
This is
And here we get to see some of the audio recording process. But I think what will be more interesting is let's skip ahead to the post-credit sequence, and we're going to get a chance to see one last image,
little tidbit
before the game truly comes to a conclusion.
Here we
So
are.
let's watch.
Anna?
Is that you?
what to make of that.
Yeah. And I suppose on that note, we will let everybody in the comments below say what they make of that. And thank you for joining us again for this incredibly spoilery little feature that we decided to put together. We really wanted to talk about the ending, and I wish we could sit here for another hour and talk more about BioShock Infinite because there's so much.
I'm sure we'll be talking about it. I'm sure all of you will be talking about it in the days and weeks to come as well.
Thank you to the GameSpot viewers on behalf of me, Kevin Van Ord, and Carolyn Pettit.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.